Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our best chess games of all time series. So in this series we're following the best of the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history, and today I've decided to show a really beautiful game that was played in 1994 between the two legends of the sport, between two former world champions Vladimir Kramnik and Garry Kasparov. So this game is really special because in this game you'll see Garry Kasparov getting destroyed in a beautiful sharp tactical way like he used to dominate his opponent. But in this game I think you see also beautiful motifs that I think you can apply in your own games, and I really love to see sometimes the games that Garry Kasparov lost because they're really special. In order to beat Garry Kasparov back in the 90s, I think you had to pull off your immortal game sort of. So that's why I think whenever you see Garry Kasparov losing in the game was really special. If you have followed maybe the beautiful games between Vasily Ivanchuk and Garry Kasparov, where Garry Kasparov lost, also that games were really great. Vasily Ivanchuk pulled off really some immortal tactical shots. So as I said, when Garry is losing a game, the game is simply special. So let's see now this tactical brilliancy pulled off by Vladimir Kramnik. So here knight to f3 was played by Vlad. We have knight to f6 by Garry Kasparov, and the game started as an English opening with the move c4, but now after move g6, knight to c3, bishop to g7, e4, d6 and d4, the game transposed into the normal variation of the King's Indian defense. And okay, usually white is playing the game like this, has now a dominant position in the center of the board, has a central expansion, but in the later state of the game black has to break the position with the move c5 or with the move e5. Will not tolerate, of course, such a dominant position in the center of the board by white. So we have kingside castling, bishop to e2. We have now this orthodox or classical system. We have now the move e5, and if you have followed maybe my YouTube chess channel, I've created this King's Indian defense series from A to Z sort of, where you have all of these lines covered from black's perspective. With the move e5, white can play now many things. In the continuation of the game, we have now the so-called Petrosian variation with the move d5. So basically in this particular variation, white is saying, I will grab my center, I will grab my advantage of space in the center of the board, because now you see white has occupied the center of the board with this dominant d5 pawn, and has now simply a better position, slightly better like usual, but the position after move d5 is now blocked in the center of the board. So it means now that when the center is blocked, that it's obvious where white will attack the position, probably here with some expansions b4 c5, and black will dominate here in the position with the move f5, and maybe later stage with the move f4. So here in the continuation, knight from b to d7 was played by Garry Kasparov. So he's trying to get his knight here on c5, is trying maybe to play the move a5 b6, creating sort of a blocking system here on the queen side. So here in the continuation, bishop to e3, and this move is quite provocative because obviously this bishop can be attacked with the move knight to g4, and that was also Garry Kasparov's continuation. But the idea about this move bishop to e3 is to play queen to d2, and then to maybe, like in the Yugoslav attack similar, or maybe in the 150 attack, if you have followed maybe these openings, you're trying to get rid of the darks with bishop, which is of course a good defender in front of the king, and then you're trying maybe some h4 h5 ideas, opening the h file and maybe deliver checkmate on the h file. So that's why black basically needs to play now the move knight to g4, and this is now what that white wants to get, this move bishop to g5. It creates an extra tempo. We have now the move f6, bishop to h4, and you see now the main goal, as we said in the beginning, is to play f5 f4 now for black. That's the usual King's Indian attack sort of from black perspective. So black wants to pull off his expansion on the king side, but this bishop on h4 and the bishop that was on g5 is paralyzing a little bit the attack of blacks on the king side. So that's why it's a provocative idea here by Vladimir Kramnik. You can of course kick away further the bishop with the move g5, but you don't gain so much because your f5 goal is not so dangerous anymore, because you don't have a connection between the pawns. So as I said, it's really nice, this Petrosian system here that Vladimir Kramnik pulled off. So it's an unpleasant game for black, because black wants to play probably more classical systems where black can attack the position on the king side. So that's why after move bishop to h4, now we have h5 by Garry Kasparov, and now it's a huge threat because g5 h4 could happen, and it could trap the bishop. So that's why here we have knight to d2 by Vladimir Kramnik. If g5 now happens, you see now we play bishop to h4, h5 is not working because we'll simply take out also the knight. So it's a little bit also slowing down the attack of black. So that's why after move knight to d2, we have knight to h6. So Garry Kasparov is getting out of this attack, and now comes f3. So you see basically what white gained here, I think, is again the same idea. Now the bishop can on f2, and as we said also in the beginning, the main attacking goal sort of is here to maybe play the move b4 c5. So this bishop rerouted here towards the king side, and will eventually come here on the square f2, but in order to support the further c5 attack. So it's, I think, a brilliant idea. It's one of the best systems if you want, of course, to beat the kings in the defense. So now comes knight to f7, and this is a good move, I think, here by Garry Kasparov. First of all, we have to say this is a good defensive knight. It controls really the center of the board, especially the square e5, but it also liberates here the dark square diagonal for the dark square bishop, because in the king's Indian defense, it's this dark square bishop, you can really tell million stories about the dark square bishop. In one occasion it's good, in another occasion it's bad. In this particular position, when the position gets more and more blocked out, I think this bishop is getting worse and worse. So that's why it's, I think, a good choice here by Garry Kasparov to maneuver the knight to f7 in order to liberate now, as we said, this other diagonal for the bishop. So in the continuation, we have queen to c2, and now bishop to h6. So here Garry improves simply his position of the bishop, and now comes really a nice idea here. The engine says it's a slight inaccuracy by Vladimir Kramnik, but I really liked his choice because it's an aggressive choice. It's sort of a paradoxical thing that here Vladimir Kramnik pulled off. He castled queenside, and this move is almost saying that he's trying now to stop his attack on the queenside, the usual queenside attack that white is playing many times against the king's Indian. He's saying now, I will try my chances maybe with h3 g4 here on the king side. So it's a little bit a paradoxical thing here that as I said, Vladimir Kramnik pulled off. He's changing now the direction of the attack. He moved his attack from the queen side towards the king side, but this move is inaccurate because of this move that Garry Kasparov didn't play. Bishop to e3 was now his huge opportunity to get this bishop into the game. Maybe then he can play something like a6, and then bishop to b6, bishop to a7. So he would reroute now the bishop, and still the bishop would be perfectly fine. Probably even in this position, white is slightly better, but I think here Garry missed his chance in order to get his pieces back into shape. So here in the continuation, after move queenside castling, Garry Kasparov played out the move c5. So he's trying now to get this queenside paralyzed. He's not allowing maybe some b4 ideas for white, but I think b4 was never really a chance anymore for white, because white simply castled queenside, and you're not trying to open the position where you have already castled. So that's why with the move c5, here Garry Kasparov is saying, okay, you never play now in this game the move b4 anyway. So here in the continuation now, d takes c6 was played by Vladimir Kramnik. So the position is getting more and more open. You see now after move d takes c6, we have now several weaknesses in the position. d6 is weak, c6 can be also attacked. I don't like also this square f6. It could be also vulnerable, but the good part here for black is, as I said, this knight on f7 that's controlling the d6, that's controlling the center. This knight is also good. At least in this scenario, black has opened now the b file and can maybe use this b file in order to attack maybe the b2 square. So as I said, after this trades of pawns, the game is getting more and more dynamic. So we have now king to b1 by Vladimir Kramnik. We have now a5 by Garry Kasparov. So he's probably trying now a4, a3, simply opening the position. I think in this position you can even play a4, even if white takes now the pawn on a4 with the knight, then the a file is open, so you can maybe use the a file and the b file in order to attack white king. So you should not count pawns now in these types of positions when the kings are on opposite sides. This is now typical opposite side attack game where we should be fast in our attack. So here in the continuation, knight to a4. So Vladimir Kramnik is blocking now this attack. He's saying you not open the a file, you not push this pawn further. In the continuation, we have now c5. This move is good, but it's also bad. We have to say it. Sometimes in chess, these moves have double function, because this move c5, okay, it is here creating this nice grip around the square d4, one of these bishops, or maybe the knight will come on d4, but it leaves also a little bit the d5 square unprotected. So as I said, it's creating a good idea here for black, but it creates also weaknesses in the position. The better idea again was this idea to play the move bishop to e3. Many times Garry Kasparov missed the move bishop to e3, maybe then to cement the knight on bishop on d4. Garry Kasparov will play this move in the later stage of the game, but it was again his opportunity to get the bishop in a beautiful shape. But after move bishop to e3 here in this position, the game could be critical with this move c5. Could be an opportunity. Look at this, knight to c5, knight to c4. I'm not sure what to say about this position. The engine gives here equal chances for both sides, but I kind of like more still white's position, especially because of the d file attack, especially because now of this brilliant bishop knight here in the center of the board. f6 is still weak. So as I said, this is maybe sort of a position that the Stockfish engine would love to play, but in this game it wasn't played. Here in the continuation, after move knight to a4, as we said, c5 was played by Garry Kasparov. We have now knight to c3. So here Vladimir Kramnik is saying, okay, you don't have anymore the c6 pawn, now I will occupy the d5 square. So now finally Garry Kasparov plays the move bishop to e3. He's cementing now his bishop on d4. This bishop will be brilliant on d4, but the problem I think about this maneuver of the bishop is that you don't have a good defender in front of the king. Many times the dark bishop of blacks is not only used as an attacking piece, it's very important defensive piece in the position. So as I said, you could really tell a million stories about the dark bishop of the King's Indian. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's an attacking piece, sometimes it's the defensive piece, sometimes you should trade it off, sometimes you should not trade it off, sometimes it's used in order to stop the attack. So as I said, there are so many ideas about the dark square bishop. Now Garry Kasparov pulled off this idea, bishop to e3 with the maneuver to d4. So knight to d5. So here Vladimir Kramnik is saying, you will occupy the d4 square, I will occupy the d5 square. At least I have this beautiful centralized knight. So bishop to d4, knight to b3. So Kramnik is saying, I'll not tolerate your dark square bishop, I will take it out, but it creates then a supported pass pawn. You see, that's the main issue here. Then black has, I think, also a solid game. So we have now bishop to b7 by Garry Kasparov. We have knight takes d4, c takes d4, and now f4. This is really how to play now with the bishop pair, because we have to say the game transposed now into bishop versus knight middle game stage, where white has, of course, the bishop pair on the board. And when you have the bishop pair on the board, you have to create some mess, you have to create some dynamics, you have to open the position. It's not time to keep this position static, you have to open the position wherever you can. So after move f4, we have rook to b8. Garry Kasparov is now finally also including his rook into the attack. We have a rook to f1, and now knight to h6 here by Garry Kasparov. And now comes what is, in my opinion, the critical moment and the most beautiful moment of this particular game. So maybe you can pause the video and try to see now at least a good dynamic idea here for white. Take your time, it's maybe not so easy to see, but I think it's a brilliant idea that Vladimir Kramnik pulled off, and I think this was a huge surprise element that Garry Kasparov missed maybe in this particular game. I really loved this game because of this idea that Kramnik pulled off. It's probably one of the most dynamic ideas that I've seen in my life. Really a stunning tactical shot. Okay, take your time, try to see now at least and beautiful attacking idea. So okay, here Vladimir Kramnik played a brilliant d5 move, and c5 is so cool because there are so many things that can be done. Of course, knight to c5 it's not so good because you're leaving here a little bit this f6 unprotected. Now f takes e5 will happen. You have to play, look at this, d takes e5, and now the knight is hanging, so you don't have time to take out with this pawn because the queen is pinned. If you try here g5, maybe to get rid of this dark bishop, which is very annoying, then you get rook to f6. It's also a nice tactical shot. Rook to f6, knight to f6, and then eventually you lose also this pawn on g5. So this is a devastating attack. So black is simply tactically losing the game. So after move c5, Garry Kasparov played probably even a worse move. He played bishop to d5, and this seems like a great idea because you're getting rid of this centralizing knight. But the only, I think, continuation that could solve a little bit the positional problems of blacks is now the move d takes c5. Still, white should be much better because of this piece activity that will happen now. Now bishop to c4 is a brilliant move. You see, you have to take out the knight. You cannot really tolerate any more the knight, but the main issue was you have to first play d takes c5. Look at this, bishop to d5. The king has to step back, and now finally white will take out the pawn on e5. This wasn't played in the game, but it was, I think, the only way maybe for Garry Kasparov to prolong the game, but it was really hard to see. This is just a pervert stockfish line that I'm showing you now. I'm not sure how many of us would even come up with some kind of idea like this. So f takes e5 would be the continuation. Now the only defensive goal is to reroute the knight in order to defend the e5, but also the f6 square. Now the game transposes into this one. e6 is really dangerous. Now knight to e3. Look at this, how dangerous this position is. Now queen to c1, and now g5. That was the only way to defend the position, but look at this, now bishop to g3 is going to happen. So still you see white should be much better in this particular position. The problem is now if you try knight takes d1, you get simply queen to d1, and still you don't have to time to maybe maneuver the knight because your square h5 is vulnerable to some attacks. So as I said, this game is simply over. So let's go back after move knight c5 that Vladimir Kramnik pulled off. If you play knight to c5, then it's not getting better. Again, it's idea f takes e5. You don't have time. Look at this, the knight is hanging, so everything is again messed up here for black. So after move c5, as we said, Garry Kasparov took out this annoying knight here on d5. We have e takes d5, and now knight to f5. So if you take now this pawn, then of course here the square g6 is vulnerable, so you have to be careful. This bishop is aiming towards the queen side, the queen is aiming here towards the king side. This bishop is getting into the game, so it's now really a dynamic position, a perfect position for the bishop. So that's why here Garry Kasparov tried knight to f5, which makes really sense. It's cutting off here the diagonal, protects of course the g6 square, and it creates also a nice attack against the bishop on h4. But now here Vladimir Kramnik again pulled off a brilliant, stunning tactical shots. He simply continued his pressure with the move e takes f5. That was the beautiful pawn storm that here Vladimir Kramnik created here. He never stopped his attack. He just simply continued his pressure. After move f takes e5, Garry Kasparov had basically only one choice. If you play something like, I don't know, here f takes e5, again the queen is hanging. If you try d takes e5, then you get this tactical shot rook to f5. You don't have time to compete with the pawns in the center of the board. After g takes f5, queen to f5 is going to happen. Look at this, these two pawns are still annoying. This h5 is weak. The rook will come into the game, rook to d3, rook to g3. So this is again a simple win here, I think, for white. So this is not working. After move f takes e5, here knight to h4. So this was the only move for Garry Kasparov. He has to get rid of this very annoying bishop. But now after move e takes d6, Garry Kasparov is now facing a really deadly pawn storm. 3 pawns are connected and will simply roll, will simply continue the pressure. And now also we have to say there is now the threat of g3. If the knight moves again, rook to f5 seems dangerous. So the knight is on the edge of the board is a little bit loose now here on the king side. So we have now knight to e5, we have rook to d4. If you try g5, of course, here in this position, in order to cement your knight, as we said, we simply play g3, the knight is simply out of game. So after move f8 takes d6, we have said knight to e5 was played by Garry Kasparov, and now rook to d4. So now again the knight is attacked. We have our knight to f5, and finally the tactical shot that Vladimir Kramnik has been waiting for. He sacrificed so far bishop, now he's sacrificing rook for the exchange, but the main strength of this position are of course these three connected pawns. After move rook to f5, we have g takes f5, queen to f5, the pawn on h5 is hanging, king to g7, unnecessary move here really by Garry Kasparov. He has to include now more defenders into the attack, and now Vladimir Kramnik played bishop to h5, although probably rook to h4 is slightly more accurate to get the piece into the game, because after rook to b4 we can simply take out, and now rook to h7 is a huge threat. If you play something like, I don't know, rook to h8, then it's not getting better, because we'll simply play a3 and will not allow here to get this rook into the defense. That's now the most important thing. And then eventually we can also play bishop to h5, then of course also rook to g4 is an opportunity. Look at this, maybe we can play rook to h5. If you play, I don't know, maybe just a slightly passive move, let's play something like this. Then also the huge threat is this move, rook to g4 is a great deflection idea. This wasn't again played in the game, but after knight to g4, look at this, you're getting into a checkmate pattern with the bishop and the queen. So this is a huge threat. But okay, Vladimir Kramnik took now with the bishop. He didn't play rook to h4 immediately. After move bishop to h4, the only way now for Garry Kasparov to defend the position was now this move rook to b4. That's the only way to prolong the game. At least this rook is getting somehow into the game, but still after move rook to d2, maybe queen to c8, attacking this pawn, queen to f2 is okay. At least blacks solved many tactical problems, but still with these three pawns I think white should have a comfortable game. Will eventually push them further. You can maybe try rook to c4, c6, look at this, d7, then maybe again queen to f5, getting the queen into the game. So still I think this is a much better position for white. So after move bishop to h5, Garry didn't play the move rook to b4. He tried rook to h8, but now comes this tactical shot again, this motif rook to g4. As we said, you cannot get rid of the rook, because the knight will be deflected from the square g6, and then you're getting a checkmate. So we have here king to f8, we have queen to e6, really nice move, because if you try rook to h5, then you get rook to g8 checkmate. So it's still not working. Many pieces of white are hanging, but you can never take any of them. So rook to b7, Garry Kasparov is trying to protect the 7th rank. We have now c6. Now finally the pawns are rolling, the pawns are marching. Look at this, these three pawns are much stronger than this poor rook here on the b file. That's why here Garry Kasparov tried to get some kind of a drawish chance. He played rook to b2, king to b2, queen to b6, and now after a couple of checks, the main issue here that there are no perpetuals. Vladimir Kramnik calculated everything till perfect detail here. Queen to c2, queen to b5, another check, but now here after move rook to h7, now comes a beautiful move d7, cutting off any potential check. Even if you try just one more check, we'll simply move the king here to c8, and then will eventually promote here a new queen. So really great game. After move d7 in this position, Garry Kasparov resigned. Really brilliant tactical sequences that Vladimir Kramnik pulled off. I really loved this move c5. That was, I think, beautiful breakthrough where Vladimir Kramnik realized, okay, this bishop got traded off d4. Maybe this bishop is not the best piece on the dark square bishop. It's not the best piece on this diagonal, but imagine this position where you could still have this dark square bishop at least in front of the king. So that's why, as I said, the dark square bishop in the King's Indian is a special story every time. So you should be careful, but sometimes it can be used also as an attacking piece. I really love this game because I played the King's Indian myself. I played many times against the King's Indian, so it's, I think, really a cool study here. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more King's Indian ideas, check out my King's Indian series. Here's the link where we have studied also some other defenses. And if you want to see more best chess games of all times, check out my best chess games of all times playlist. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.